Jamie, would you like to start us?
I'm Jamie.
Bruce Newell.
Elsie Arnson, the state superintendent.
Jenny Stapp, state librarian. Ann Kish.
Kenny Harlich, MSU Bozeman Dean.
Erin Fromplace.
Marta Stark, state library.
Suzanne Reimer, Montana State Library, statewide consulting librarian.
I'm Melissa Williams, I'm state library staff.
Sonia Williamson from Mount City, the Sagebrush Federation coordinator representative.
Nancy Schmidt, Laurel Public Library, and the South Central Federation coordinator.
Lynn Frank, Lane County Librarian with that.
Jane Brookie, Phillips County Library, Malta, and I'm the coordinator for the Golden Plains Federation.
Jonathan Lewis and Clark Library, Helena, and I'm the coordinator for Broad Mountains Federation.
Nancy Hall, budget office.
Honora Braid with the Little Public Library and Camera Federation.
Tracy Fitz, state library.
Bryce Maxwell, Montana National Heritage Program.
Jessica Edwards, state library.
All right.
Can I just clarify, sorry, Nancy, you're budget office for
I'm
the
the governor's
state?
budget office for the library. I'm the analyst for the library.
And we have an arrival.
Yes.
Oh, you noticed?
Did you sign in? Okay, no, you can do that later.
State Library.
All right. And then, so we'll start off. Does anybody have any changes or additions to the agenda? I was wanting to talk, and this isn't maybe a change, but at some point during the work plan, I was wanting to talk, just to start getting some input on if the commission feels that the structure and the content of the meetings are making the best use of our time and meeting your needs, and so that's something just that we can talk about maybe when we get to the work plan agenda item. Maybe that's not a new addition. And then, hi Ken.
Hi.
Ken Wall has arrived. Any other changes or additions? Do we have some introductions for, well, we did introductions. Do we have any staff longevity awards?
So it's my pleasure to give Suzanne her 20-year pin.
I would love that.
Statewide technology librarian, kind of helping libraries with their computers and so forth. Over the years, her job grew into more strategic planning and board development and training in the future of libraries, but she's always kind of maintained a heart for that technology. She's always doing her best to remind me, as kind of a granola, that technology is incredibly important, both being mobile and having high-speed broadband. And she's, amazingly enough, spent all those years helping libraries with E-rate, which, having helped a few myself, having her sense of humor is the only thing that's so congratulations.
Yeah. 20 years of schooling and they put you on the day shift.
I want swing.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you. All right. We'll have, has everyone reviewed the minutes from the August 14th meeting? I think, do I need a separate motion for both of those? Okay. Can we approve the August 14th?
So
Jamie.
moved, yes.
Second.
Second. Does anybody have any comments or discussion? Are there any public comments? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. How about the August 29th meeting. And that was, we had just for everyone here, we had a second meeting to discuss the budget because we weren't quite prepared to approve a budget at the August 14th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the August 29th?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any public comment? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion passes. And then the June 12th, we're not doing that one yet. We're
No
just
action on it.
reviewing that
Yeah,
one.
That's
Okay.
just in there, in
That's
the
just-
materials for record.
All right. So we'll move on to the 2019 work plan review.
And before we get into the work plan, I just wanted to make some announcements about staffing at the State Library. We're going through a very significant amount of recruitment coming out of the legislative session with some of the additional funding that we received. And in some cases, that's involved some internal hires, which is prompting more recruitment. But first, I wanted to announce and congratulate Jessica Edwards. She's been recently hired as our new data coordinator. Again, that's a new position for the State Library, one that's intended to help us both better manage our overall data collections as well as help us use data better to do better reporting and planning. This is something that we've talked about extensively, and so we're really, really glad to have Jessica on board. She's got a lot to learn about all of the various reporting work that we do, and she's interested in learning more about the technology that can help us do a better job in looking at our programs and helping us report back. And so I'm really glad to have Jessica in this position. And then we did an internal recruitment amongst our shared catalog system administrators, and we recently hired Amy Marchwick to be the lead of those positions. We've had 3 system admins. We've recruited Amy into the lead position, and now we are starting the recruitment process to hire the 4th system administrator for the shared catalog. And you'll recall the discussion there about needing more system admin support to support the growing catalog. So this will allow us to do that. Amy is currently looking at those recruitment materials, and we hope to get that posted in the next couple of weeks. And then you had met Melissa Wallace a couple of meetings ago. She was hired as a new reader's advisor, and due to some family circumstances, she left us to move out of state. And so we have recruited for a new reader's advisors for the Talking Book Library and made an offer this week. So we hope to have that position filled very quickly. Okay. In addition, we had announced at the August meeting that Maya Daria left us to pursue a PhD, so we're recruiting for that position. We're recruiting for the position that Jessica left, the Outreach and Electronic Resources Coordinator position. I mentioned the MSc sysadmin position, and then the 2 GIS tech positions that, again, are the top priorities coming out of the session. So lots of recruitment going on, lots of work with HR, lots of onboarding work, and everything that comes with hiring that many staff.
Could I ask a question, please? Thank you. When it comes to the pool, is it a robust pool compared to the last time, possibly, that more opportunities were there? I'm just reflecting on what is happening at the OPI and seeing, because the private sector economy is, with our unemployment rate being so very low, and I don't know if you're seeing that at the university system, but just wanting the best. I mean, we want the best.
Yeah. We had a good pool of candidates for the data coordinator position. I know for the reader advisor position, the pool was quite a bit smaller. For our GIS positions, we tend to get good, robust pools there. So, and we'll see on the sysadmin position, that one in the past has been a little bit harder to fill. And in fact, we had a conversation with the budget office just this week about the difficulty in recruiting going on in the state with the really high employment rate.
Thank you.
Any other questions about staffing?
Do you need me to open it on any of these? Will you?
If you,
For
if
your
you want.
reference?
Nope, I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good, thanks. Moving on to the overall work plan review, we continued with the spreadsheet model. The commission seemed to like that model. We did add in some additional information at the commission's request. We had all of the lead staff who are responsible for the particular work plan objectives go in and create their priority rank if they had more than one work objective. So through the spreadsheet, we can sort out and filter based on work plan priorities. One of the things that we did after having the lead staff go in and do that work was to filter by employee, for example, and just to get a better understanding of the workload that some of these work objectives mean for individual staff, and to make sure that we were comfortable that we had the appropriate resources necessary to complete those objectives. In the future, what you will see, and I hope this will be meaningful for you, is an update of the milestones for the different work plan objectives and an indication where we may be falling behind on any of the particular objectives. And then I want to remind the commission that the RIPPLE conference, the Research Institute for Public Libraries conference, is beginning on Sunday in Billings. That's the conference funded by IMLS out of the Colorado State Library that is all focused on using data to help do better planning and analysis. Our staff are putting it on in conjunction with the Colorado State Library staff. We have about 70 participants from around the state, including a number of our staff. Kenning is representing the commission at that conference. Jessica and I will both be attending, and our project coming out of the conference will be to think about how we can take some of the work objectives in the plan and using dashboards and other kinds of online tools, do some more dynamic reporting around these work objectives for us, for the commission, for future planning.
Wow, that's wonderful.
So before we get into discussion about some of the specific work plan objectives, I just wanted to ask if there's any more feedback about this particular structure. We're continually working to try to improve process that is more helpful and informative for the commission.
It would be helpful for me if we included, if the staff included last names.
Okay.
I mean, I know some of the people are, I don't know. A lot of people.
Good.
So maybe having a page with definitions, it's acronym heavy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. And I will ask staff, I did catch a few acronyms as well, but make sure that staff spell out any kind of acronyms as well.
Especially the mark, what is that?
Who is that guy? So looking more at some of the specific objectives, if you have questions about any of them, please let us know. There were a few that we had talked about with the commission as priorities for the commission at your August meeting. Those included looking at our partners and community partnerships, looking at, of course, the funding and the House Bill 633 study. We'll talk about that in more detail in your next agenda item. Looking at broadband, and so I wanted to talk a little bit in more detail about those specific objectives. We're going to be starting looking at our partners through a community partner mapping exercise. I don't remember the date of that.
October 28th.
So we're going to have a meeting. Some of the commission are participating. All of our staff have been invited. The goal of that meeting is to do a couple of different things. First, to provide some definitions on what we mean by partners and the types of partnerships we engage in. I think that will be very helpful for us particularly to identify who our key stakeholders and partners should be, and in what ways and to what level we engage with them, and the amount of resources it takes to effectively engage with them. So that's the first objective. The second objective is to then begin to identify who those key partners and stakeholders will be. This is important for the commission to be engaged in. It's also important for our staff. As we, again, focus on flattening the organization, we know that there are stakeholders. Mako is a great example where different staff have engaged with Mako in different ways, never really conflicting, but probably not leveraging that relationship most effectively. And so I think it's going to be really useful for our staff to get a better sense of where we have common stakeholders across the different programs, and to begin to think about how we most effectively use our resources to engage with those kinds of stakeholders. So those are the two objectives as we begin to identify who our strategic partners are, and then in the future think about how we most effectively engage with them.
And I wanted to thank Jamie and Bruce for volunteering to be part of that day, and then and everybody and the other. And thank you too for volunteering. We kind of picked a day just where it would work for everybody. So I appreciate everybody who volunteered. And Jamie, Bruce, and I will represent the commission in that.
And that's at the state library.
It'll be at the State Library in our Grizzly Conference Room. Joe Flick is going to help us lead that.
Well, that'd be good.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments about the partnerships work objective? Moving on to broadband, there's not necessarily a specific work objective tied to broadband on its own, but we are doing significant work around the Gigabit Toolkit review that was conducted for all public libraries around the state. You'll recall that in the spring, we used some coal tax money to hire a contractor to complete Internet 2's Gigabit Toolkit for all public libraries. And from that, we have an extensive amount of data about the current condition of technology in libraries, including their hardware, as well as their broadband connectivity. And I'm really excited that through a relationship with Internet 2, we've been able to create a relationship with Simmons College in Boston. Simmons is partnering with Internet 2 on a different effort. They have an IMLS grant to create more real-time network monitoring tools for libraries, but is also interested in the fact that as a state, we collected this data for all of our public libraries. And so Jessica and Suzanne are working with their staff to help us dig into the data so that we can better understand some of the resulting information that's come from the study. They're going to be working on a professional article and possibly a conference presentation out of that work. And then our intent is to have a final report to bring to the commission, the governor's office, our congressional delegation, and others about the true status of technology in Montana's public libraries and what that means. We know that it's far behind. We know that libraries have computers that were purchased for them through our Broadband Technology Opportunity Grant Program 10 years ago that they're still reliant on for public access computers. The level of internet access is woefully behind in the state. This study is going to give us hard numbers to be able to talk about, and then hopefully help inform future programs to address those concerns.
You think it'll be possible to utilize some maps in the process of doing this?
Certainly. Yeah. I did a very, very quick overview of the results, some of the results for Internet 2 in August. And one of the maps I shared with them was a map of communities where the public library is the only access point for Wi-Fi. I think it was 29 or 30 communities in Montana. The public library is the only publicly available Wi-Fi.
I appreciated the article or the interview that you gave for the article that was, the blog post that was featured. Yeah, and the Montana State Library did post it on Facebook. If you guys want to look at it, yeah, you represented the problems articulately, but hopefully, but with hope.
With hope,
Mhm.
exactly.
Can you send that link to us, please?
I will. Yeah.
When is the report then supposed to be complete?
We're targeting February,
Oh,
so.
Debbie Schlesinger graduated from Simmons College.
Okay. The other particular work objective that I want to bring to your attention during this agenda item is one around pay equity and the pay policy. The state's making changes to how employees are classified, that classification system, and we're just learning about what that's going to look like for our employees. But one of the challenges that we regularly wrestle with that you're aware of is compensating new employees fairly and also maintaining equity in compensation for all of our employees. And so we don't have any solutions yet, but that's something that we want to really focus on this year, working with the Department of Administration and potentially some consulting help to think about other kinds of models that can help us make sure that we are fairly compensating our employees, looking at how we make new hire offers in ways that are fairly compensate those employees, but also equitable across our staff, and then progressing the pay of our employees more fairly.
is that happening across all state agencies? Are you just doing that for the library?
The updates to the classification are for all state agencies. The review of our pay policies and how we compensate staff would be specific to the state library.
And it's the Department of Administration that's leading the effort across the state agencies?
For the classification, yes. Mm-hmm. Those are the work objectives that I wanted to highlight in this particular agenda item. Are there other questions, or if staff have any comments about any of the other objectives they want to talk about?
One thing on the broadband, in spite of the sort of national criticism of the weaknesses of the national broadband map and the data, the companies are, including all the 50 or so telecommunications companies, have been reporting twice a year, or when there's a change in their system, the 477 reports. And that's at the census block level, which is pretty fine. And it doesn't give you a reality of what libraries are using, but it gives you the potential. The only thing it doesn't give you is the cost that they charge, which is the biggest factor that's missing. But they are reporting contractual arrangements and things they're supposed to. So it's a pretty wealthy batch of data that's easy to access and look at. So it's more for potential connections.
All right, are we ready to move on to talk about House Bill 633?
We were going to have the commission take action on those.
Oh, on the work plan, to accept it.
I move we accept the work plan as presented.
Second.
Discussion?
Can I just ask, there are still a lot of blanks in the columns, some of the columns?
Probably on the formatting.
Is that the project task tab that you're looking at?
It looked like there were some alignment issues with the text.
Am I looking at the right?
Which one are we looking at?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thinking about,
The ranking.
well, so for example, organizational flattening, org flattening, row 13.
Where we just haven't identified specific milestones.
Right, or staff, or resources available,
Or the priority rankings.
priority, yeah.
Okay.
There are a bunch of those kinds of blanks throughout the spreadsheet.
I think that's just on our staff to continue to flesh out.
So is it in a place where we can accept it or approve it?
That's a work in progress.
Can we accept a draft?
I think
Can
we
we
could
accept
accept it
it
as a draft if we wanted to amend
I agree.
the motion.
I wouldn't expect this would ever actually be completed, right? This is a dynamic document.
It's intended to be dynamic
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
as milestones kind of shift and change.
the maybe we should review this at our next meeting as well, which we wouldn't naturally.
Okay, so if it's a dynamic,
Well, if we're just accepting the framework.
right,
The- Yeah, the framework,
Right.
and largely the objectives themselves.
then I don't think we need to amend the original motion.
Good.
What do you think, Henning?
I agree.
Okay. Any other comment?
One of the things I thought was missing in here, it's embedded in smaller pieces, but I don't see like the Montana Spatial Data Infrastructure listed at all. Maybe it's implied in many things, but it's certainly implied in geo-elections and throughout, but I think it's the stewardship of that's important and probably needs its own standalone kind of a mention at least, or it's kind of embedded in a more granular way, I guess, rather than at a broader level.
Yeah, and I think that's our intent, is to keep it at those specific priorities.
Task doable kind of
Right.
things, yeah.
Specific to the spatial data infrastructure, what I think you'll see, especially in the next land plan, is more concrete details about the data and the steps we need to better understand the maintenance of the spatial data infrastructure specifically. So to the extent that we hope to work with stewards to develop that kind of information, that itself might become a specific work objective coming out of the next land plan. But, I think we want to keep these to very specific, measurable objectives, which is why you see the focus on like LiDAR and geo-enabled elections rather than something more broad like stewardship. That's our intent. We're certainly open to feedback from the commission about that.
What if those, all of those that would, rather than a standalone row, all of those that would support geospatial related items would be together?
Grouped together?
Yeah, just grouped together.
Bless you.
We can certainly do things like that, but we would need some guidance from the commission as far as what groupings you're interested in. That's an easy one.
So the notes area is blank.
Oh.
That could be a good place to just put that this is part of the larger stewardship in the note section.
I think we'd want to be specific to staff. We don't want staff creating a variety of notes that are inconsistent and then can't be used to do that kind of grouping.
What do you think about the grouping idea? Are you still leaning toward a standalone?
I'm not too concerned about grouping the geospatial or anything unnecessarily, except to, tie the task activities to the broader kind of goals. But this is a working document that's at the task level. So
Okay.
makes sense to me.
Okay.
And I guess I would be a little bit concerned if we got too much detail kind of piled into it, because at that point it would become less useful, I think, to us commissioners as a quick review tool to see how things are going. I think we have a responsibility for making, watching, but at a certain point, if we dig down too deep, first of all, we probably can't do it, and second of all, it makes everyone crazy.
We've added the crosswalk to our own strategic framework. There's an option to crosswalk those that are relevant to the land plan, for example, make that apparent, and also to the LSTA 5-year plan to make that apparent, if that would be helpful to the commission.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, is there any further discussion in regard to this, accepting this particular document? Understanding that it's a work in progress. Okay, the motion's on the table to accept the plan. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Motion passes. And next up, we're going to talk about a House Bill 633, which is a bill that led to the creation of a subcommittee whose objective is to look at diverse funding sources for the state library. And then we have an update. I think they've met.
They have met, yes. The subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Legislative Finance Committee and the Education Interim Committee, had their organizational meeting on September 18th. It's being chaired by Chair Beatty out of the Bitterroot. Other members of that committee include Representative Lou Jones, Representative Senator Solomon out of Ronan, Representative Janet Ellis, Representative Moffy Funk, Representative Edie McCafferty. There's a gentleman out of Bozeman, I forget his name.
Representative, is it either Walt Sales or Grubbs, Bruce Grubbs?
Yes, Grubbs, thank you. Yes. Yeah. So it's a great committee. Many of the members of the legislature that we've worked in the past. I think the point that I want to convey about the tenor of the hearing is that I didn't feel like we were having to start off by explaining our services and helping the legislature understand why they should find value in our services. I felt like they already understood that point, and we were there to talk about funding. And Representative Jones talked at length about hearing throughout the legislative session and through the budget committee about the need to diversify the funding. He talked about concerns about the future of the general fund in the state of Montana, the future of coal in the state of Montana, and a desire to find funding options for the state library that make sure that we are not at risk to that kind of volatility. So that to me was very heartwarming, that I didn't have to get up and explain our work, that we were truly there to talk about funding. So our intent is to work with legislative staffer, Chris Wilkinson is the staffer on that, to really proactively start the creative thinking about different kinds of funding opportunities for the state library. In thinking about the funding, we've been asked to think about the costs of our services as well as the costs of services that we have been asked to provide or would like to provide, but have not had the resources to do that. So that goes on beyond the budget amount that is currently in our budget. One of the things that I've said is we're being asked to provide 21st century library services with 20th century funding models and funding amounts. And so in order to be proactive, we've been brainstorming about the cost of our services and potential funding models. And I really want to emphasize that this truly is a brainstorming. We want to make sure that the ideas that we're putting forward are palatable, but also helping us think creatively and not box us into any one kind of funding model. So you have before you a draft memo. I want to make sure I'm clear that this is a discussion draft, as well as a draft budget, and then a draft chart showing just what the state library's budget would look like if we had had regular 3% and 5% growth, what the dollar amount of the budget would be had our funding kept up with inflationary costs. We did have a meeting with staff from the governor's budget office this week about the suggestions put forth in the memo. I wasn't going to be comfortable talking publicly about any of these without having that conversation first. So we have had that conversation. I'm grateful that Nancy could be here with us today as well. I want to get your input, and then I think our next step is next week to share this information with members of the subcommittee. Their next meeting is in December. Again, this is a chance to sort of really proactively start that discussion. One of the approaches is to keep the discussion very simple. We've heard from several of our partners that some kind of across the board allocation to agencies would be an appropriate funding model. And so that's the why we've sort of led with that internal service fund option, be it an across the board rate that's tied to overall agency budget, FTE, or some other kind of comparable metric where each agency is contributing proportionally in recognition that all agencies benefit from and rely on current services, and also in recognition of the fact that there are many services that we know we could and should be offering if we are only funded to do so. Most agencies rely on cadastral data. We archive every website in the mt.gov domain to provide permanent public access. That benefits every single state agency. And we've had calls from like DPHHS saying, your web archive's down and I have a contractor who needs access to that kind of data. We would very much like to be playing a more proactive role in managing open data for the state of Montana and helping agencies with that dissemination of their public data. Again, that's something that we're currently not funded to do. Another, we think, very important example of something that if we were funded we could do is make sure that we are using a consistent address data set for all state agencies. All state agencies manage address data. We all do it inconsistently. Many of us are keeping redundant data sets. Our staff were involved in preparing mailings for a data breach with an agency a few years ago, and the address data necessary to do that mailing was woefully inadequate. We would see significant increases in efficiency across state government if all state agencies were using a common address data set. Again, we're not trying to do that. Also importantly for all state agencies have public services that they offer to the public. And one of our responsibilities is to make sure that the public is aware of those e-government services. We do that directly to Montanans, but we also do that through Montana's public libraries. And we want to make sure that librarians are well trained on e-government services and have the tools and resources necessary to deliver those digital library services. So those are some of the arguments and justifications for why I think that kind of across the board model is really justified. And I would hope we could keep it as simple as possible.
Thank you. Sorry I hope I haven't stopped you when you need to be, and I'm so glad that Nancy is here from the governor's office. So are you saying that the internal service fund is a priority, number one, then, and how funds can be dispersed to the library?
I would argue that that would be the simplest and most straightforward option. And in that way, I guess, be my top priority.
Mm-hmm. And then would there be others that could mix with that, or would that be the only one that would be going forward at this point? Are they looking at others?
I think the intent is to be diverse. As you know, I think you could pretty readily fund the entire budget with an internal service fund.
Okay.
Just looking at the House Bill 2 number as a metric. A very, very minuscule percentage, I think it's around 0.25% of House Bill 2 could fund the budget. But there are other options.
Sure.
And those are the other options that we've laid out. And thinking very strategically about how those kinds of funding sources have a direct tie to the kinds of data and services that we're talking about.
So when it comes to this going forward, if indeed, others were, but if that was the internal service fund was looked at, when it comes to preparation of budgets for our agencies, then that would be up in the front part of it. So in other words, we wouldn't, I have 2 budgets within the agency of the Office of Public Instruction. So it wouldn't be that we would constrain those other budgets. It would be something in the formation of the budget that would be noticed. So an ISF would be given X amount of dollars up front and not taken from what we have to distribute to schools or for our internal operations. Has that been a discussion then on when that would take place?
We're not at that point in those conversations yet. And I think that's just one possibility. Looking at a metric of FTE or some other kind of possibility is certainly on the table. But again, this is sort of for brainstorming, and I think until they zero in on some ideas that are really palatable,
Sure.
you probably won't get to that
To know what that would be.
level of detail.
And even though we are 15 months out from the session, I hope it doesn't scare anybody. But
My palms are sweating.
I know. But when it comes to using services, nothing is for free. So not that I want to offer up, it's just that I need to make sure the budgets of what we distribute to schools, of course, and what we can do to enhance students isn't something that, I want to say, is taken away. But of course, any agency, I would think, if they have services that are used from the state library, would want to enhance that. So it's just the manner of how that goes, Jenny, is going to be an interesting dialogue. So, good, excellent.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I'd just like to input here that this is really early in these stages, so not to panic.
Oh, I'm not.
And that was one of the things that we talked about in the budget office meeting the other day, was that to take an overall percentage out of the general fund budget, there are exceptions to the general fund budget. For instance, school funding, that is a big chunk of money, that if you took a percentage of that, unless you can tie it to the library somehow for the schools, that, those are exceptions to, saying we're gonna take an overall percentage. So this is really, really early talking stages.
Exactly.
Not to panic.
Oh, I'm not. I'm very methodically thinking. I appreciate you being here, Nancy. Thank you.
And, to the extent that you can help guide and advise, that's the point we're at. If this kind of across the board, whatever metric is used, is palatable, then I think we would be at the point of getting into the kinds of details that would need to be thought through to make it actually.
Most importantly is sustainability.
Exactly.
We need to make sure that we sustain the services that we do receive. So I agree. Thank you.
It's better to have the conversation now
Of
than
course.
5 days before a vote in the.
I think? Yeah.
We know, especially from the pass-through agencies, they are the ones that have been most vocal in pushing for something that is more across the board. Almost 20 years ago when that pass-through model was created, they were the largest users. But now, with advances in technology and changes in the services that the state library has, we really do benefit all agencies. And those agencies are pressing to make sure that use is reflected.
It strikes me that one of the potential sort of benefits of sort of a general simple scheme like this is maybe we could construct the funding in such a way that libraries of all types can just sign on to some of these statewide services without having to sacrifice their budget. Or, it would give everyone the ability, if they wished, to take part in 21st Library Services. Would change the conversation the state library was having with our partners around the state, open up, make it more possible for more kinds of, more a diverse group of partners, big and small, of all types of libraries to kind of play without the money being a problem. We could get by the money and start worrying about training and start worrying about thinking about where we concentrate content and some of those kinds of things, how we getting it into, as per the resolution, the fairness resolution, getting it so that it's actually changing more Montanans' lives. So I think it's really, it's maybe a first stab at finding a how to actually bring across some of the promise of the fair use, sufficient library services for everyone in the state. I think, which was kind of why I asked a question about maps for the broadband, because I suspected that we'll see kind of gray zones. And I think that for other library services, there are gray zones. And if we had some funding that made it possible for us to turn gray to bright, shiny yellow, or whatever the good color would be, it'd be good to do.
I think he brings a really very important discussion point here. not so much where the money is being drawn from, but what it's opportunity for. And I think that is the expertise that you bring to this discussion of where our future is and what this opportunity can be, rather than, because the money just allows the opportunity.
Exactly.
So I think that is a focus that we can do. Having multiple on the table, I think, would be good for them, and then they can pick and choose. But I think strengthening why we need this and why it is important is the mission.
So,
I think it's also good because these are, for most state agencies, these are kind of silent perks that nobody really knows about. They just take it for granted that it's there. And so I think this conversation is really good because it shows all state agencies how they're using library services without directly having to go to like the library site. They're still using the services. It's just an undercurrent of business as usual.
Yeah.
But I think it would really help to show all state agencies that the library is supporting your agency with that funding.
Yeah. And also could be doing more to support the agencies if only it was funded.
I would see if this actually came to pass, that there would be a likely another sort of advisory committee made up of agency heads to do as we do with libraries and with the map world, to synchronize their needs with what we are working on, and make sure we have a fairly tight link there, so we can remain agile and remain responsive to their needs and out in front, perhaps, of needs.
Would that be a separate committee from the NAP, or would that be possibly just changing?
I would think I would want
structure
I'd want to have a separate committee so that it was sort of, this is what state library, so state agency, so someone from health says, we're really working on, I don't know, fill in the blank, vaccinations or wildlife diseases or something like that. We need your help in promulgating this, or we're fighting mussels, invasive mussels, and that would sort of inform our efforts, since even with this kind of proposed increase in funding, we still have limited funds. We have to make choices, and would help us take and do as we do with our other programs and prioritize, find places where there's consensus that, okay, this is where we're going to concentrate, this coming year.
I would just suggest we currently, through the Natural Resource Information System, have a Natural Resource Information System Advisory Council that is primarily the coordinating agency for that.
There is something like that already?
It is only for funding there's a couple of others involved that is very heavily focused on natural resources.
And I'm seeing if this would come to pass, this would be all agencies.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, potentially, the funding that is there, the natural resource information system, would be rolled up into this larger plan, and as that happens, that this advisory council can provide.
It's so easy.
It's all messaging, making sure that we are together on the Capitol complex. And the Capitol complex just isn't confined to Helena. So we could internally have those messages to employees as well as to any of our partners that are out there for the validity of why. So that's part of the messaging, but it would be the timing of when that is implemented.
Sure. So I want to turn your attention to the budget spreadsheet. You'll notice that the top table is the current budget, and the bottom table would be a proposed budget. Again, this is looking at not only the adequately funding the current services that we have, but also beginning to address some of the service needs that have been backburnered for so long because we haven't had the adequate funding to accomplish those objectives. So it's a pretty substantial increase, but I think it's an increase that is in line with what the funding could be or should be had the funding kept up with costs and we hadn't gone through the significant budget cuts that we went through in the 2017 biennium. So I think we need to ask for what we need, and then to Elsie's point, make sure that the funding models allow us to continue with increased costs. Some of the budget items are broken out in more detail. That's because there is opportunity that we see to have some of those services funded through specific funding models that are outlined in your funding memo. Some of them would probably best align with some kind of across-the-board funding model. I think all of these numbers are very realistic, and I'm happy to talk about any one of these services in more detail if the commission is interested. But I think this gives us an adequate baseline to think about truly what the state library's budget should be coming out of this effort, and then planning for the future. Again, our mission has I don't want to say changed. It's still the same mission, but how we deliver 21st century library services has certainly changed, and the funding needs to account for that, and it needs to allow us to adapt to new user needs and changing technologies in the future. And right now, I do think we are stuck with 20th century funding and 20th century funding models.
So we'll put the onus on us to communicate the value. I mean, I think that as we saw at the subcommittee meeting a couple of weeks ago, I think that wasn't really a discussion. I think that was accepted. But I think as we talk about this, we without getting fat heads about this, I think we do need to talk about how the state library is sort of the intel in the box, to Erin's point, and remind folks of that, and then seek specifically when talking with, to Evan's point again, with the directors of the various agencies, to Elsie's point, about the Helena sort of campus, to make sure that what we perceive as values are what are in the top of mind of agency directors, so that we are, in fact, they're seeing cost, but they're also seeing value, and it seems to them that they feel that they're getting a good return on their cost. The value is greater than the cost.
Yeah.
If we're not doing that, then figure out how we can do it.
And I think one of our best partners in this is every library that's in the state.
Yes.
And those are the people that are on the ground that can talk to the legislators in their area and say, this is what we need in our library. And if it fits in with the mission of the state library, then we have an amazing outreach there that is more than just a few of us and you. And I think we need to be very conscious of keeping all the libraries up to date with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which is great that the Federation people are here.
It's also, in my mind, there's kind of a bit of a ongoing and constant tension between serving the state agencies and serving local government, and we have a lot less statutory and other requirements for local governments, but and most of this, I realize this budget's really early, but most of it's focused on statewide, although in traditional library services, there's a big increase in the digital library. But I still, I mean, for instance, I'm just looking through the Federation reports, community outreach, is a very small part of this, but I personally would like to see that grow a lot. And, I think the West Central was the one that had the largest percentage. They've got 10% of their budget was, mainly summer reading program was for community outreach, but there's so much potential with that. And the library, and even in like the GIS world, the state library served as really the resource agency and mentor and everything for local governments because of the sort of gap in Mako and others stepping into that role. So I realize this has to be more state oriented in that sense, but it should be nice if we could more fold in the local in more ways. There's no increase in the consulting and learning budget in this particular first cut, for instance. So I think there's a lot of discussion needed there, as well as the partnership with Mako, because so much of this is intertwined in many ways that we don't even realize. And by local government, I'm also including, tribal governments as well as with that. So,
have they set the date for the next meeting?
It's in December. I don't have the date off the top of my head.
And do we know yet what information they can use that we could provide them for that meeting?
I think this is a really good next step.
Okay.
They haven't asked for any other kinds of specific information at this point. In an early discussion draft, they talked about wanting to know more about any kind of federal or state laws that impact our funding, looking at how other, these kinds of services are funded in other states. So, we've begun thinking about that kind of information, but at this point, they haven't asked for that. I expect that they will.
And what is the mechanism for communication for what they need? Do you have a particular contact?
My plan is to share this information through the chair and members of the subcommittee and include the legislative staffer.
Thank you.
So Jenny, the figure that you're proposing, 14 million and some, is clearly aligned with the 5%, if you have gotten 5% increases all this time, right? Is that realistic? I mean, I know part of this story is to shoot high, right? We get somewhere along that track, but do any state agencies, have any state agencies gotten 5% increases?
No.
But my sense is this has less to do with tracking 5% than it does with properly funding the programs that we're being asked to do to provide service for people. It's being driven by costs for us really doing our job, as opposed to just looking at a static increase in cost of living or whatever it is, inflation. I think the lines are interesting in a depressing kind of way, but what to me the powerful argument is, these are all things that we've identified would be critical things for us to take and fulfill the promise of a proper library services, digital library services, in which 21st library service, which tend to be digital-ish throughout the state, and that's what it costs. And no free lunch. You have to pay for what you get. This is what drives it, not a line, to me.
I understand. I'm just thinking of the entire cycle, right? You have to pay for what you get, but the payment is coming from taxpayers, and taxpayers are not getting 5% increases to their salaries, right?
Right. Again, the line to me is, and if you concentrate on it, I think it becomes a distraction. Again, I always fall back to, Kenning, this is what it costs to do what we need to do. Will, in fact, Montanans, directly or indirectly, receive value in excess of the cost? If they are, yay, we can make an argument. If they're not, well, then maybe we shouldn't propose it.
So in parallel to this, you've had discussions on House Bill 715, which are a 20-year look back on agency expenditures and programs, and then a 10-year forecast. And I don't know how this parallels with this discussion that we're having at this point, but I believe it does. So do you want to share where the look is on that? And that's going to be a discussion start of 2020 with legislative, more than just the education interim subcommittee.
Right. I can share the documents that have come out of that study for the state library. And it is just a capturing the historic funding going back 20 years. I think the thing that's challenging when you look at the current funding compared to 20 years ago and to have any forecast is that is not right now being informed by a true reflection of what the service models are now and who knows what they're going to look like 10 years from now. So there is this effort, but I sort of scratch my head to know how realistic and how informative that's actually going to be.
So this is going across all agencies are having this look at, and it's done by legislative fiscal. It's a heavy load. I don't know, Nancy, if you want to add anything more to where we're progressing with this, but as you said, a forecast going forward, especially in a digital world with technology.
And no one has sat down with me and said, what do you project library services to look like in 10 years? And what are those costs going to be? I mean, it's purely, everything that I've seen right now is just a fiscal exercise.
It's interesting.
This is interesting.
This,
I'm muddying the water.
Well, what I'm presenting here, I think, is a true reflection of where we are right now and where we think we need to be going.
I think it's important to articulate the need as well, because we react to the governor's budget rather than being proactive. The only things we can provide are one-time only type, funding, when we're asked to, before the session begins, before the governor's budget comes out. So I think this is a really good tool to show these are our needs, not just what we've currently been getting, and these are ways to fund it. Because that's really, we can show them our needs till our faces are blue, but without this second piece, nobody's going to take those needs seriously. And then they'll be like, that was the whole reason to have this, this exercise go through, was to show how we can fund the current needs. And, I think in the past we've proposed some really large pie in the sky type of things, especially with the, with the broadband. But this shows clearly how the need is really articulated and how it could be funded to serve everybody. And so I think this is, really, I wasn't quite sure what it meant when they passed the bill, but seeing this now, I'm like, this was an excellent opportunity for us to do that research into how we can better fund ourselves.
It seems to me that as a commission that we'll be doing our job when there are no libraries who want to take part in some of these statewide things. There are no state agencies or other partners who want to get this kind of stuff but are prevented by cost, that we can take and make it possible so that those communities or those partners who don't have the wherewithal but have the needs, everyone gets to play. We're all independent. We're all in the same boat. That's when we do our job.
Go ahead.
Representative Jones gave a luncheon speech at the Montana Association of Counties on sort of his 16 years working with the tax base and kind of the dismal picture of our situation with traditional extractive industries funding most things and how it's a small piece of the pie anymore, and there's no real solutions. That there's a lot of discussions on how to deal with the information age and all the technology companies and how they can kind of carry their weight with this whole process in relation to taxation, et cetera. But certainly I've been thinking a lot about that talk since Mako a couple weeks ago, and certainly in a broad sense, libraries are a key part of that because the foundation for that is there. I can't name specifics or anything, but certainly if you try to think about how you deal with that in the future, libraries and all the strategic planning things we've done is core to that. And it's also core to the, keeping rural way of life we have in most of Montana viable and alive in the future. So certainly I think that's one of the main arguments is to position the libraries to have the core strengths to take that on and to leverage that.
So Jenny has developed this memo, and one of the things that I would anticipate that they might ask for in December before we next meet would be a letter or a speech or something from the commission. And so I don't think that we need an action item, but I want to make sure that you're all comfortable if I take the initiative to do whatever becomes necessary.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I want to just take the temperature of the commission. It seems like you're comfortable with me moving this memo and suggested funding forward.
Yes.
More than comfortable.
We good on that? All right.
Is yes enough, or did you need a motion?
I think yes is enough.
So next we're going to talk about the study administration of the Montana Natural Heritage Program. And Bryce and Jenny are going to talk about that. I just wanted to comment that I really appreciated the staff questions because when we first talked about this, I had a lot of questions and most of them the staff covered. And I really liked how you kind of divided it into, well, here's what we can answer. And well, that question is why we're doing the study. So some of my questions aren't completely answered, but it's acknowledged in this list of questions that they're being considered. So I appreciate that.
Bryce, I don't know if there's a chair you can come join us.
Take my chair. Can I stand up? I can stand. I stand. Go for it. Stay put.
So as I shared with the commission at the last commission meeting, in looking at the negotiation for the current biennium contract, we've sort of raised the question of is a contract administration the most effective and efficient way to achieve the objectives of the Natural Heritage Program, and that we wanted to spend some time studying those questions. So we've spent a lot of time visiting amongst ourselves. We've reached out and had meetings directly with staff to really get a sense of what kinds of questions go into studying an administrative change in how we administer the program. And I'm glad you found the questions helpful. This is the kind of feedback that we got from staff. Some of the questions are, of course, fiscal in nature. A lot of them are related to any kind of human resource changes, as we would expect. A lot of them have to do with sort of the culture and branding of the program. Some very practical questions just about travel needs and that kind of thing. And it gives us a good sense of what the staff concerns are. From my perspective, there's really two questions we need to answer. Would directly administering some or all of the program be more efficient, and is it financially feasible? What benefits might be gained by looking at doing that? And then secondly, what would the impact to staff be in terms of moving them from being university employees to being state of Montana employees, and impacts to any kind of benefits they receive, leave, retirement, and that kind of thing. We certainly don't want to do any harm to those kinds of employees. The other thing that's important to us is that we maintain a relationship with the University of Montana. They've been a great partner with us, and nothing implied in this study is intended to convey that we're dissatisfied with them as a partner. And the program gets a lot of benefit in terms of access to resources on the campus and relationships with people on the campus that are very important to the continued success of the program. In our talking, I think what's becoming more realistic is some kind of hybrid model where those services that most directly align with the campus would remain under contract with the university, and those services that most directly align to the data management and data dissemination of the library would fall under the direct administration of the library. Where that sort of boundary is, we haven't yet determined. I don't think it's a neat line, but again, if we think it's financially feasible to make those kinds of changes, I think we would be prepared to make that kind of recommendation to the commission at a meeting later on. We hope to be able to make a recommendation one way or the other sooner rather than later, because any kind of transition like we're talking about would be a significant lift to our budget office, and we need to make sure that we have the adequate capacity in central services to both help with the transition and then to take on the added workload going forward. when I talk about the financial feasibility of making this kind of change, it really is the resources necessary in our budget office to do that kind of work. And we would anticipate needing to hire a couple of additional staff for the central services to manage additional staff and to manage additional contracts. And so giving ourselves enough time to have a transition were we to make this change in the next fiscal year, for example. I want to ask Bryce to share his feedback. One of the questions the commission had last time was perspective from the university.
Well, I was just going to say, just to make sure everybody in the room is aware of what the program does, it manages statewide databases on plant and animal species. Then that information is used by all kinds of federal, state, tribal, private consulting, environmental review processes. So right now on the books we have about 44 employees. If we look at our org chart, you'll see about 28 because a lot of those are just 3 months at a time kind of folks. We make good use of short-term temps. And just to emphasize the importance of the study, at the end of the last biennium, we were at 40% of our core funding that we received in FY08. With an increase this biennium, we're at 55% of what we were in FY08. Other things that I wanted to emphasize are the importance of our partnerships with all of our agencies. As our funding has declined, they've come to the table and are providing $280,000 a year in supplemental core funding just to do our core work. They don't say, you must do this with it, you must do this with it. They say, here you go, do what you do. So that really shows a lot of trust in our program. And it shows the importance, and I would emphasize that with the commission, the importance of considering all of our partners in any decisions you make, because they have come to the table and really supported us. I think that's what I wanted to get off my introduction. What was your specific question you wanted me to ask?
Just other perspectives that you have, perspective from staff.
Okay, well, how does everybody respond to change? Nobody likes change, but that's like what happens every day is change. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, right? The world is guaranteed to change, but nobody likes change. So change is scary. So that's certainly, we've been through that. But when we kind of go through the step-by-step process, I think the feedback that we get are people really value freedom and flexibility. And they might be a little concerned about bureaucracy that they see in state government. And mostly that's because, and again, I'll go back to one of the things I think makes our program special. They might see something dysfunctional going on in, say, a big state agency, Fish, Wildlife, Parks, DEQ, and Heritage will come to the table in situations like that, bring partners together and get stuff done where people in their own agency say, I got too much bureaucracy going on, I can't get this stuff done, can you do this for us? And so they're a little biased. We've emphasized to them, we're a small agency, we can get things done. So that's been another just discussion point. There are issues with field work and our science staff that would be something kind of brand new for the library to take on if we went the full model. Just as background, even within our program, we have true just amazing expertise in things that vary from a computer programmer to someone who knows what every lichen they can see as they walk through the forest. So it's just quite a disparate set of expertise within our staff. It's kind of like, if some of you are old enough, the Hogan's Heroes. These guys are people that are just very into what they do, and they want to be able to have the freedom to do what they do, and they do a good job at it. And so again, that's that freedom thing. yeah, I think I'll leave it at that if there's.
I'd like to comment, I've been the commission sort of attendee at meetings of the partners for years. And I think that there is sort of a special chemistry going on with the staff and the program that really does miraculous things with darn few resources. I would hate to take and spoil that. I want to leave people whole. And I would also want to leave that connection where the program is hell-bent on satisfying user needs and working closely with partners to make sure that what is being done there at the State Library in Heritage is directly addressing the needs of the partners, the people who are playing. If we mess with that, that would be a big mistake. I think we have to evaluate all of these options, again, in the lights of, does this make things better or worse for the people who are using these products? And as long as that could be, navigated, I'm sure it's not simple. It strikes me as a great idea, and I love the idea of sort of the hybrid sort of model. But I think we need to keep in mind that in the end, we need to keep the magic in the bottle. I mean, because it's really a remarkable organization.
And when you say the magic in the bottle, I came to that in terms of thinking about this whole issue and thought about, well, why do we have a special program? And when you look across the network of heritage programs, there are heritage programs in all 50 states, all the Canadian provinces. We are one of the special programs. There are several special programs, but we are one of them. And I summarized for staff why I think our program is special. And one is our staff expertise and dedication. There isn't really a weekend that goes by that there's not people there, working on the weekend. Our statutes, I can't say enough in terms of our being in a neutral, non-regulatory agency, how that allows us to serve that role that I was talking about before of bringing partners together to solve problems. If we were in a DNRC or an FWP where there might be an underlying flavor of, well, the manager wants to take things in this direction, we're just there to provide the information. So that serves us well. Library confidentiality serves us very well. And then our partners, that's the other thing. And we've actually exported that model to other heritage programs across the network in terms of having these annual partners meetings, allowing those partners to kind of speak up both with their dollars and their voices about the direction that they want the program to head. Those are the things that we definitely don't want to touch.
My main question was about benefits, and so it looks like you're putting a lot of time into studying that. But when I'm thinking about individual employees and them building their resumes and being associated with the university is going to be important to them. So will we still be associated enough with the university that they could consider for this, working in this program a good career move? And also, will we be associated enough with the university in order to be eligible for grants that are specific to universities?
Yeah, if the whole program was bought into the library, we would miss out on eligibility on some grants. We would likely have some staff leave just because they are very science oriented. Again, I can't emphasize how different our staff is within our program. The more traditional computer data management, GIS folks, I think would fit in perfectly with the library. The science staff would be more, it would be a little bit more of a discrepancy there from traditional. Not that it couldn't be done, but yeah. The other thing that I talked to Jenny and Evan about the other day is recruitment pools. We make really a large use of recruitment from undergrad and grad students, bring them into our program. Some of them spend one season with us, some of them spend 4 or 5 years as they're kind of transitioning from undergrads to graduate school, and then they might come back after graduate school, work for us for a little while, and then at that point, we don't have enough money to pay them what we should be paying them, and so then they go to a consulting firm or something like that. So I think West Tech in Helena thinks of us as the recruiting center for them. We have a lot of people that end up going there.
Right, so you, echo Bruce's comments, because I've attended most of the partners, and it's by far the best. And as my business, I work with a lot of state heritages. It is a crown jewel in, nationally. Are you going to the partners with this? Is it usually in the fall? Is the partner meeting?
Yeah, we're looking at late November, early December for the meeting.
So this will be a discussion among the partners as well.
Certainly, yeah, absolutely.
I've asked Bryce to make sure we have that meeting before your December commission meeting, so you have the impact from that group. And I too wanted to echo the importance of the partners. The partners group grew out of the Natural Resource Advisory Council. That is a library model that we brought to the program, and I do think it's what makes the program truly successful.
I know you talked a lot about the university relationship, but I would add that to your list of things that make it special. I know it's not exclusive, there are others, but as you mentioned, many of the best heritage programs are associated with university systems. And just wanted to emphasize that I don't think that has to be a contractual relationship, and otherwise we would be looking at this as it is. It will still be someplace for contractual relationship, but we can have a great relationship between the heritage program and the university without it all being contractual.
Yeah, I would say to that point, so the last few years I've put several surveys together across all of the programs in the US and Canada. I was trying to wrap my head around, can I borrow ideas from other programs? What is, quote, a heritage program across the network? The university programs are, I would say, the better programs within the network. When I put that survey together, Montana stands out as a hybrid already. And as a result of that, we had programs like in Oregon go to their state librarian and say, hey, can I join up with you? Because of, and it was because of the neutral non-regulatory statutes and how that would put them in a better stance. So again, I think that right now we don't want to break our bonds there.
It keeps the scholarship at the top and forefront, which gives it credibility to the general public.
Yep.
So I just have a question about hiring practices. First thing you said was that you use a lot of 3-month, contracts. Are those mainly hired through the university system? And so is our hiring process more cumbersome? Would that make it harder to hire all of these part-time? Or, is there a benefit from the university? Do they have more fluid hiring practices than the state? I'm not sure.
My sense is that those temporary short hires, it wouldn't matter one way or the other. It's more about the labor pool, the applicant pool, and we don't want to lose the university applicant.
Okay.
Yeah, but Melissa and I have met with state HR and asked those kinds of questions.
Okay.
And there are other agencies, DNRC Fire, for example, is a good example where they have to hire short-term staff for summer fire season. And there are state processes that are fairly simple there. We also hire interns. And so, whether it was through a relationship with the university or the state library directly making use of university students through that process, we have that ability as well.
There is one thing that, Jamie, when you were speaking there, I just realized, and this actually hasn't come up with Jamie and I's discussions, and having nice discussions before, but when we're in the field, it is very noticeable that we can, if we're working with an agency, for instance, BLM will say, here's an area that we want surveys completed in. If you want, please contact the private landowners in the area if they would like surveys done on their wetlands as well. And if you're in a state agency, you don't have as good of access typically versus if you're a university employee. I think landowners are a little less threatened by university than they are a state agency. So that's another thought for
I think an example would be if there was a dinosaur dig on my property, I would rather have a university professor there with his students and then have DNRC come out with their panels. Not that DNRC would do anything.
Which, again, it kind of goes to why you'll get a state agency that'll say, can you do these surveys for us? And then from the private landowner's perspective, we're neutral, non-regulatory. It's information. So, yeah. I'll throw out another story right now. There's a little controversy going on between Walleyes Unlimited and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on the native status of walleye in the state. And both of them, both Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and Walleyes Unlimited, were happy to come to us and say, will you make the determination for us? You're a trusted source. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting story because walleye are potentially native, but it's a matter of a time period. It may date back to the Pleistocene when they were native. So,
But based on scholarship research.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, that's, to me, that's the most important part of the strength of the program.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That is so cool.
So February, you guys looking in February for a potential date for a proposal following the study?
I would hope maybe sooner than that, maybe December. To the extent that a transition would need to occur, that would position us to have the time to build the capacity and to do that transition effectively. You know, one of the concerns that we all share is not breaking things during a transition period.
I'd want to make sure that the speed of our looking at this didn't take and leave any partners unable or other interested people able to chime in. I don't want to slow walk it, but I think we really need to make sure everyone has a chance for their say.
And at this point, the partners don't know that these discussions are going on, with the exception of the university. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And this seems like a good time to take a 10-minute break before we resume with the Federation reports. Careful,
These are boring.
business.
Yes, ma'am. Boy, are you fierce.
I know,
Raised voice and all.
I use the hammer.
Whoa.
It's a librarian.
School library. I really appreciate the Federation coordinators. I know some coming. I know some of you have traveled a great deal. And so we're looking forward to your reports.
I wonder if maybe Melissa and Evan wouldn't mind moving in.
You have in front of you the annual reports. I would be happy to answer any questions. But yesterday, the coordinators and I met with Bruce and Jenny to just kind of talk about federations in general and to really do some sort of brainstorming about what works and what doesn't. Which I came out of there with some practical ideas for going into next year, how to maybe make the reporting process a little less painful, frankly, for everyone, librarians and coordinators and MSL staff. But the other thing we did yesterday is we talked about how to do this reporting for you, and maybe in a way that's a little more engaging, because you have the report in front of you, so you can see how libraries spend their money. And Anne had suggested a panel, and after kind of going back and forth and talking about, well, what do we think the commission would be most interested in? Coordinators are going to talk to you about some of the challenges that they see out in their region, and also some of the things they saw that they thought were a cause for celebration. So instead of doing the typical round robin, they're just going to kind of talk maybe a little bit more for you, bigger picture, what they're seeing out in their areas. And so, just go ahead, get started. Whoever wants to go first? You don't have to go first.
You can let Frog is first. It's alphabetically.
Well, John pointed out that actually Kenora would be first if you were going by last name.
I'll start just by saying that when Bruce suggested yesterday that this panel be about joys and concerns, I know that the great joy for Broad Valleys Federation is the chance to get together as a federation and share ideas and learn from each other and have the state library staff come and do presentations for us. But it's the networking, it's the ability to share ideas that is really valuable for the libraries and the Broad Valleys Federation. And as you might know, we do a 2-day retreat every early spring. This year, I think we were planning for March 7th and 8th, Friday and Saturday. We have traditionally held that retreat in Butte. We might move out of Butte this year, perhaps to Fairmont Hot Springs, because they have a new retreat facility there that they've really expanded and remodeled. It would be a good place for us to hang out for a couple of days. But that for us is the great joy.
And I would say ditto that for Tamarack Federation. Our retreat is usually the second week in May. And in our 14 libraries, the majority of them are very small libraries with 1 or 2 employees. And so for their trustees and their staff, it's a good time to get together with other people, get better ideas. And the Federation funds are what make it available for them to be able to do that. So we love to have anybody come and join us for that time. And we've had libraries from other federations come because of the time of year it is, they're able to come, or because of whatever the topics are that we're training on. It's something that's good for their library also. So they're close by outside Glacier Park or whatever, so they decide to come visit us for a couple days. So it's really a great opportunity for sharing. Our federation goes all the way from Darby to the Canadian border to the Idaho border. So a lot of little places that don't see a lot of other library staff except for when there is an opportunity for them to get together and they don't have travel money in their little libraries. So federation funds allow them to be able to go to MLA, and then the federation pays for the retreat. So it's a great joy.
My library federation is the smallest. There's 5 public libraries and 1 tribal community college library that we actually give funds to. And our funds, we meet twice a year. And it's more important for us, instead of having retreats or whatever, to augment our local budgets with the funds. People will see also pay for our travel, because none of our libraries, including our tribal librarian, wouldn't go to MLA without those funds to get the continuing education. So it's more important for us to be able to use those funds to help just for our expenses. And we do get together twice a year, love seeing each other, visiting. The state library has been really helpful on giving us some training when we meet twice a year. We met last week, and Amelia had arranged to have that CIT training. A guy came up from the Sheriff's Department in Bozeman all the way to Low Point and gave us that CIT training, and it was wonderful. Just some of the stuff he did on how to counteract aggressive patrons, how to deal with them, to realize where they're coming from. And then we also had some suicide training, prevention, recognition mainly. He was very good, so I sure appreciate Amelia arranging that for us. Thank you very much.
So in our federation, we're kind of in the same boat. I mean, there's 15 of us in that federation. We did discuss possibly doing a retreat, but the majority felt that it was more important to keep that funding to supplement the travel. There are numerous libraries within our federation that without the money, we would not be able to attend the meetings or MLA. I think you brought up an interesting point about the community outreach. I would love to see more people do that. This last year was the first year that we had that model to choose from. We only had 2 libraries choose that. I wish that I would have looked to see how many we had for this year. But again, that goes back to, they feel that they need that money to, just for everyday things that OCLC shared catalog would agree to go funding. But yeah, so it's definitely really appreciated, the funding.
In South Central Federation, we have 18 libraries, and we have one county that doesn't have a library, but they are encompassed with all of the others that do, and they use mostly Billings, I believe. It is the library that the residents in that county, if they don't use, win it, or something like that. We meet twice a year, and we do the afternoon trainings. A crisis team this year had a crisis, so they didn't show up. So we had training. So, we improvise there on the fly. We really have thought, like some of the others, to do a retreat. We've even discussed having a retreat with Sagebrush, and we would bringing the 2 together and finding a central location. I think Billings always comes to mind. And Chico. Oh, Chico sounds good too. I know, because central located. On this side. It's over there. When you look at the report, you'll see that we did more outreach with our communities and whatnot. And to be honest, we don't use our funds as much for the shared catalog and OCLC and stuff like that. We use them for traveling, yes. The small libraries use them for, believe it or not, their broadband. This is the only way that someone can afford to have the internet at their library. So, it's like, keep it coming. Can we have more? To be honest. But, it does help that we do get this money. There's no doubt about that. And every time I see my local representatives, I'm always saying, yeah, by the way, have you stopped in my library lately? Which, maybe their wife or spouse is a user, but not so much them, but just getting them in there. Going to the schools more and that kind of stuff. We are definitely trying to get out there more so people see us. But, we go to our meetings, we move our meetings around to different libraries. We just held it in Big Timber. In the spring, it'll be at my library. Last spring, it was in Billings. And we like seeing all the other libraries, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. It's a joy. We like it. Thank you for doing all the reporting.
The joy of being at the end. The area that I have for the Sagebrush goes from Circle, Jordan, all the way down to Ecolab, Broadus, Baker, Weebo, Glendive, Miles City, and Terry. We're all on the MSC, which was, of course, a great joy that we all joined, and a lot of the money we get for Sagebrush is used for that. The concern I do have is within the 10 libraries, I know that we have 3 retiring librarians this year. So filling someone in small towns with someone they're looking for a daughter-in-law who might want to be a librarian, and they have to get rather creative. And the thought of having somebody that would have a library degree is really limited because they also do not have a budget that's ever going to pay for someone who just came out of college with a library degree. The bottom line, it's money. And that's also a concern of shrinking budgets. The best thing about small libraries is we do receive a lot of community support. And we work very well with each other. We've developed a really good system between the 10 libraries that we do outreach constantly. And when you said you noticed that, Ken, that only 10% of this money was spent, if you ever come in to the Mouse City Public Library and just look at our bulletin board, you'll realize we do outreach for everybody and everything on an ongoing basis. I mean, I can't think of one department that does not come to our libraries and we refer people to those departments. So even though we do not spend money with our budget, it's just part of our jobs. We're like the biggest social service agency in town. So just so you would always know, we were talking about libraries yesterday and that people don't have a concept of what the Montana State Library is. We talked about how it's you're not like the highway department. And when I sat here this morning, I thought, you need to change the name. You need to be like Office of Library Services or something that
captures everything that you do. Because when you say state library, you know, most people say they don't know there is a state library until they're employed by the library. And then they realize there is a department. So part of it is that branding of the state library department themselves. I mean, when we say OPI, we know you're covering every school there is in the state. But we don't get that feeling from the title of Montana State Library. So sometimes rebranding is good. So that's just what I got from this morning when you think of all the different things that you do. But really we are thankful that you serve on this commission and know that librarians work really hard to include everyone in their community. And we do back and forth all across the state. So the meetings that are hosted with the library staff and with just librarians and staff are incredible. But, you know, and I think we do a great job with limited funds. I think we're all pretty crafty. So. I think we're all kind of frugal.
In more than one way.
Crafty, frugal. I mean, if you really think of librarians, what you get done with what you have for funds, it is an incredible service. So good job. Any questions?
I attended my first Federation meeting with the South Central, or whatever it's called, Central South.
South Central.
Okay. And I was really pleased to see that the Columbus Library had 2 people there, both of whom I know, but know that they're really committed and interested in getting that library back on its feet and getting a director there and getting things going. And that heartened me because I think they see it as a really important facility for their county. One of the things, as a retired county commissioner, I think it's so important for you to have continued good relationships. And by good relationships, do fun things with them. Have a reception and invite them, make them feel special. Don't just go to them and ask for money all the time, because they need to buy into what you're doing.
Sometimes
More than
they
just
don't know what you do.
Right, right. But they need to feel a positive part of it. That a lot of times we don't think about because we're just going in and asking for the yearly budget. And the same I told the Federation group there that day. It's also really important if you have a legislator in your area to get them to your meetings or to have a party for them. Somebody must make good pies in your town. Have a pie day or something. Just something simple so that they come in and they see what you're doing. And they see the people that are coming in for you, your constituents. Because
You see, in Mount City, we have the advantage, we're right across the street. So, and we do things back and forth, but I know in some of the smaller communities, there is no relationship between the two.
It's really important, because those are the ones who give you your meals. And it's sort of automatic, but they have to want to do it, because they support their wives, whoever, their kids. It's just, I'm sorry to get on my rant, but it's really important to make those people.
And it's good to hear
feel part of you.
someone who was a commissioner, so that you have very well know who to go talk to.
Yeah, it does make a difference. But you do such wonderful things that can't wait to see the rest of the federations.
So we heard kind of nice a number of joys of things that were going well. What's not going so well? That's what I'm just hearing from some of you. Where are the sort of the blinking lights saying, pay attention to this?
Well, I think always budgets are, just like the state library budget is being affected, so are local government budgets. And so we have to learn how to do things more economically. As Sandy said, we're pretty, I won't say crafty, but we're pretty realistic about what we can do with the money that we have. And by sharing resources across the state of Montana, that helps all of us. Every year we get students from either Western or University of Montana as practicums. And when I'm doing orientations with them, one of the things so most of them are school employees and going to be school librarians. One of their biggest concerns is that they can't join the shared catalog because their schools won't pay the money for them to join. They don't see the benefit. And those librarians, or upcoming librarians, see a huge benefit in being able to borrow materials from other libraries because their school budgets have been cut and they have no budget to buy books for their libraries. And so how do you entice kids to have a good relationship with literacy when you don't have the newest of materials out there because you can't afford to buy them? And so we see that very strongly, and we make arrangements with all those little schools around us that don't belong to the shared catalog so that we have a connection with those librarians and can get materials back and forth to them if they need it. But I think that that's a real concern for small public libraries as well as school libraries, is that they need to have those same tools as the rest of us have to be able to have equal access for all in Montana. And we need to find a way to be able to do that. I know for years we've tried lots of different conversations and it's just never come to fruition, but I really think that that's something that we really need to think about is we want the youth in our state to grow up with a good relationship with libraries and literacy. We need to make it happen. And I don't know how we do that, but I think it's important for us to try to do that. So budget is a big deal. And the other thing is to be able to get, first, again, small libraries to find board members in their communities who are interested in being on the library board for the purpose of what the library is, not because they have a vendetta against something, but because they want to make their library and their community a better place and a community center. And, if people are stretched very thin. Everybody's asked to be on boards for this, that, and the other thing, but how those little places can entice people to be on their library boards, I think is really important. So the state library used to have a training program for library trustees and it went away because of LFTA money. And I would really like to see some form of that come back so that library trustees in communities are trained and trained well and not trained by library directors who, the library board is our boss. It's kind of tough for us to train. And I think the smaller the community, the harder that is. Those are a couple.
To your first point, in full disclosure, I send you some of those practicum students. So I know that they all do go to you with the concern about how are we going to be able to participate in resource sharing of any kind. And I know that you take that very seriously and help them to figure out what their options are. And as a practicum supervisor, you go above and beyond what's expected of a practicum supervisor to make that happen. And I so appreciate that. But I don't know how to do that statewide, because obviously I only send a small percentage of the practicum students to you, and the rest are sent, throughout the state. And not everybody is necessarily going to prioritize that the same way that you do to help those people figure out in their specific situations how they're going to engage in resource sharing. And so maybe at some point that would be something that Elsie and I could work on and draw on the experiences that you have and the successes that you've had, or the hurdles that you're finding.
In Bottle City, it's interesting how many teachers we bring in materials for their classrooms. Once they do know how our system works, I can get something from a school that they really want to use for their class. So, yeah,
it's really important that they have that connection.
And I'm really pleased you brought up the youth connection. And I've said this before, I think, but there's not a program for, GIS and mapping for libraries directly, but any school in the state, public or private, can get essentially the software from Esri that the state library uses for free without very little paperwork. And I've worked with several schools doing that, and I'd really like to see that. I mean, regardless of your politics, I've really been encouraged by the kind of global youth movement lately, and it's absolutely critical in rural Montana to nurture that. And we're seeing a brain gain in some communities, like this community, where you got young couples moving back and starting businesses, which is really refreshing to see that. But I'd like to, work towards formalizing that. And the federations are so frugal with everything. You can absolutely be entrusted with broader capabilities to do this, and maybe through the foundation and other things. Where I'd love to see a formal internship program with more at the high school level as well as future librarians at the university level, where they are working, like, for instance, centered around geo-elections or the census coming up to 2020, where they're, paid a stipend or something as a junior to work in the library on the weekends and help citizens with digital literacy, because every kid I know is way more digitally literate than anybody of my age. So I'd really like to see that more formalized in ways we can leverage foundation funding and others to make that happen, where regardless of whether they want to be a librarian, getting those skills, the best way to learn something is to teach it, and the best way to do it is to help your community. At MACOM, I'm always amazed at the issues that local communities deal with and that sheriffs deal with, whether it's overcrowding jails but health is such a big thing. And they're essential to maintaining the way of life we have in most rural communities that are kind of on the edge of keeping everything alive, so.
I think she's speaking to partnerships as much as everything. Mm-hmm. So if there's a way we can find solutions toward these, with a partnership of state and public libraries and local libraries, community libraries, I think that's really important. So putting a training program together for trustees, I know there isn't an association of library trustees as we do have mirrored in public school with school administrators. If there's a way that we can prioritize a partnership and going forward, I think that is an action that we can do and move toward, whether it is for youth, whether it's for building capacity, whether it is for trustees, like I said, who are your boss. I think that is something we need to embed within our, because you asked for the pain.
Well, I want to hear more pain.
I know, I'm a sadistic person. I know, but I'm looking at action, trying to get a solution. So maybe that's something we need to embed within our plan going forward.
I love the joys, because I think that we can build on those, and I think it's also just makes us feel good. But when I hear the description that I'm hearing of some of these needs, that does inform how I think about other kinds of stuff. And at some point I have to vote on the budget, and so it really helps. What's happening in Broad Valley since the pain?
We talked a little bit about our big concern yesterday, and I think maybe we got a little handle on it. But some of the libraries are so small, 1 and 2 people libraries. They don't have a lot of time to tackle the paperwork that's required to receive their funds.
And it's a part-time job for them.
It's a part-time job for them, and it becomes a full-time job for coordinators sometimes to make sure that those libraries are following up on expense reports and reporting to the state library. Is there a way that we can make that easier for them? Or is there a way that, because most of us are full-time, is there a way that we can access their records and report for them?
I think we may have it.
Maybe.
Hopefully.
But reporting is
onerous.
And the other deal on that, of course, is the flip side of those libraries will most likely always be a small part-time library. Populations are smaller.
It might be
smaller.
Brand new. It might have just turned over and they have no idea what the Federation is. And we call and they say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Jonathan.
I'm the new library director. Yeah, hi, I'm the new library director.
Yeah.
You ever worked in a library before? No.
But it seems like small doesn't necessarily need to be to their detriment, isolated.
No.
And it seems like that's one of the things that we've done better than the average fair in Montana, is to take and reach a hand out and try to work with them.
But you know that is very true, because those small librarians, once they have that job, they want to do it well.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's the other side, they really want to run a good library.
Yeah, and we help them, don't we? We try.
Sonia, I think you mentioned there are going to be 6 retiring librarians?
Three for sure.
Yes. And are there replacements for them?
Well, it's kind of interesting, because one of them, the replacement's like maybe 3 years younger than the person who's leaving, so that'll be a replacement soon. The other one, they're looking at a person who's moving back to Circle, who was glad because her family still lives there, and she's the manager of the Barnes and Noble in Billings, who was hoping to return home. So she had said she was interested. I haven't found out for sure if she is, but that's the last I heard. So to have someone who has that background in books will be a really dynamic person for that library. And the other one is Terry, and
Do you have an employment?
she's not sure who will step up
For them is
and take that librarian job. She's trying to recruit people locally. She's also the mayor of Terry. So, and she also has a post office run. So, you know, she's done 3 jobs earlier.
Such a slacker.
Such a slacker. So she's hopeful that she has someone in the community that is interested in taking over the job. They also run a preschool program in that library now, which has been really good. So hopefully there's someone there. But, you know, small communities, not that many people to employ, still very rural. So,
But are these positions advertised throughout the state?
yeah, they will, I don't know if they'll put them through the state and living wage-wise. Nobody who doesn't own a home, because our community's houses are expensive. You know, there aren't that many houses to purchase. So the homes become expensive. It's rural, not everybody can live out in the middle of the Tulies, you know, recruiting somebody. Sometimes they'll be there for a few months and then, you know, I don't have any friends, any family, I know no one, and they're gone. So a lot of times recruiting someone familiar with the area has been the best you can do. And it's also a part-time job, so who's gonna move to Circle for a part-time job? Yeah, who's gonna move to Terry to have a library open 3 days a week? So that's the hard part, I think, with recruiting in those small libraries.
I never thought that we'd have a new library. I didn't think that this community would be as supportive as they were.
It's beautiful.
It is a nice, very nice facility, and something like this, you come in and you see this nice building, landscaped, the artwork is funky. So I'm just really proud of this little county that they did this. They had a lot of help, but the first fundraiser they had was down in an old barn, and young woman put it together. Made $40,000 that first night.
I didn't think that happened. Yeah, it is incredible how many people who, even if they don't use your library, support the library.
I was blown away, and that it happened as quickly as it happened.
You know, the small libraries are really valuable to the community. I mean, they are the hub of what's going on. And they do have beautiful libraries, you know, not fancy, but they're very beautiful, with local artwork. They're really a good reflection of that community.
I'm excited about this day because we're going to be able to have lunch with the Federation coordinators, and so we'll be able to kind of continue some of this conversation because it's so interesting to hear from all of you. And I appreciate that you came here for 2 days. Thank you. So does anybody, I think that before lunch we have time to go through the commission policy review, but does anybody have any remaining public comment or comment from the commissioner?
I just have a mechanical question. So to fill out the reports, is that done centrally with a survey, or does every federation do their own?
Good question, right?
And that's a question. So the federation reports are run through the old library directory. This is the last year. And our former IT staff person made Rice built it. And so I can go in and see and edit everyone's. The coordinators can see all of their libraries, but they can't edit or make changes as they're working with their librarians. And then the system kind of pulls it all together.
So each library enters their own information.
Okay.
And that's one of the things, it's gonna be moving into Aspen, and that, I tried to simplify based on my experience now of helping libraries for the last 3 or 4 years. Because I finally confessed to Jenny that I dread this task, and the coordinators do too. And it's partially that it's fairly cumbersome. It's partially that we do have a fair amount of director turnover. And there's gotta be an easier way. And so that's one of the things we really spent some time talking about. And I can do what I can on my end to make it easier in Aspen. But I do think that, I'm curious to know if there's something we can give back to the libraries. It's something I'd like to ask them in the rest of the Federation meetings I attend, because we would have a hard time with public libraries completing their public library statistics until we gave them a reporting system that allowed them to compare themselves over time with other libraries, so they've got something. And so I'm curious about, can we give them something from the Federation report that they can use locally? Because maybe then it won't be such a painful chore.
Part of it is just simply that the Institute of Museum and Library Services requires some of these reportings to give us $1 million they give us every year. So there is something given back, but it'd be nice if it was simpler and if it was, if there were opportunities to improve people's lives with these data, it would be great to do it.
It seems like I was talking to Bryce about, everything in my world revolves around GIS and maps, and so I'm always thinking of that. But the Survey 123, which is like Survey Monkey, but it's also has the geography, and I'd love to see these reports, in a more graphic way, to look at the links and the network connections and some dashboards and things, and that it's so easy to do that. And the state library has the expertise to do it, and I certainly volunteer to help with some of that, because it can be spread out more. There's a new thing, it's called Quick Capture, and it's a fat button app, which means you define these buttons like with an icon, you punch it and it fills out a bunch of things. And if you could spread this out, so it's an everyday kind of when you have the events, instead of trying to do it all I assume you do most of this in a concentrated period right before the reporting.
Well, we encourage librarians to do it as they spend the money, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, but if that could be made easier with the tools, it seems like it'd be really valuable. And I think the feedback to be used by the federations, because they could start to see the linkages and things and share more amongst themselves, because that's really should be the purpose of this, is to float everybody's boats higher, not just report to the feds to get money and things.
And as we're just talking about this, I'm thinking we should be encouraging these libraries to report. So you report on what you spend your money on, but how does that affect not just the story about, well, I spent my money on a program and this is what that program is going to do for the community, but then how does that have a ripple effect on the other things that are happening in your community? Because when you said earlier, Ken, about outreach, every single library in this state does outreach, but it doesn't come out in those reports because Federation money isn't spent on the outreach. But how does that affect the outreach in your community? Those kinds of things I feel are much more important for us to tell those kind of stories than just what the money was spent for and what that little thing did for the community, rather than the mushroom effect that it has after the money is spent.
So the discussions we're having here can't be different than in Wyoming or North Dakota or South Dakota in a very frontier rural state. So there has to be a collaborative voice that we could go to share. Either the reporting is changed on that end, or else we do an ancillary report that shouts out the community effort of the purpose of the reporting. to have benefit for the community. So I would think that would be what we could also do as a commission, network with other commissions in the other states and delegations if we need to further their purpose.
And that's, part of the reason why we're holding Ripple here in Billings. These kind of conversations are happening around the country. Specific to the public library statistics, there's an effort being coordinated through the chief officers of state library agencies with grant funds from IMLS to look at what we call measures that matter. And there's pilot work going on. We haven't had the capacity to be involved in that kind of activity, but hopefully with hiring Jessica into our data coordinator position, those are the kinds of opportunities that we can begin to look at.
Sure. Could I just share one little story? Because we do tons of partnerships. That's how we get our work done, is through partnerships. And we have an IMLS grant right now, or I'm sorry, NIH grant right now that is a partnership between the Missoula Public Library, the city of Missoula, the University of Montana. And it's the first time ever that that's happened in Missoula, that the city has been involved with the university and the public library. And it's for a climbing structure in our new building that will educate children about health and why they should not be sedentary. And those kind of partnerships are what make things happen. It's over $1 million grant that we got through NIH. And so, if you don't do partnerships, you don't get great things. So the more we can do and the more we can encourage, the better.
Thank you. And thank you for experimenting with the new format. Think about if that worked for you, or if you'd like to try something else next time, and let us know. Can I call for a motion to approve the Federation report?
Second.
Third. Did you get that, Marla? Did you pick someone? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seriously, thank you. Thank you for yesterday. May I begin?
Motion passes.
May I just begin by moving that we accept the safety policy? Or rescinding safety policy, the recommendation to the memo to rescind the safety policy, as in our materials.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor of rescinding the safety policy, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And ditto for the recycling policy.
Motion passes.
Sorry. I heard lunch.
I know, I said lunch. Marla, sir, did you get, a second for rescinding recycling? Okay. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
David, the meat was sandwich in front of you, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't think lunch is actually ready. I think that might take a little bit more time. So do we have time to talk about the trust agreement?
I don't know if you need me to recap. This was on your August meeting agenda. Again, it's the agreement that would allow the Trust for Montana Libraries to act as fiscal agent for grants that libraries or the state library might apply for where a nonprofit needs to be the fiscal agent. And so this document is intended to formalize that agreement between the state library and the Trust for Montana Libraries.
If I could begin a discussion by saying I'm going to vote for this, but I'm a little bit uneasy because I don't have in my head a picture of how all these pieces fit together between the commission and the trust and the state librarian in terms of making decisions. And I understand that there are further documents that we'll be examining. and I will vote for this because I trust the people who prepared this, but that I truly do feel like I'm driving slightly beyond my headlights. I don't understand exactly what's going on.
Well, my understanding is that some funding opportunities, it would be more appropriate for the state library to apply, and for some it would be more appropriate for the trust to apply.
And I get that.
Okay.
And I like that.
You get that part?
I
Okay.
just don't have a picture of what all the pieces are and how they move and how they relate to each other and how this is going to work, because I have no concern about jumping into this, obviously. But 20 years from now, when they have a corpus of $30 million or $60 million, and all the faces have changed, I want to make sure that we're setting up processes now that take and hold us beyond intentions and ready there we know about now. So I guess I would request maybe for our next meeting that we maybe get a chart or some means of seeing where all the pieces are, how they move, how they relate to each other, and what, frankly, how are the decisions made? Where is the power? And are we really being good steward? Is there a clear path of stewardship for what we're saying is a good thing to do? Which I still, of course, believe it is. I just think that I just don't understand how this all fits together.
I agree. So, specific question. The top part of the document says that the trust will act as fiduciary agent for some grants from third parties, but then everything in the numbered list below refers to all money. All money received from whatever source.
I think that's all money that it serves as the fiscal agent for.
That's the intent, so if we need to make that more clear. So, this is intended to be a limited scope document, and we're still talking about the need to draft an MOA. I think perhaps the commission should take the lead on drafting that MOA with the trust board, and I think a chart would help with that sort of flow of priorities. What we don't have documented, and what this document is not intended to be, is that relationship between the commission and the trust board where you identify priorities for funding and where those priorities, how they are identified, and by what process can the commission say, yes, this is a priority, no, this is not a priority. Whether those opportunities are identified through our staff, through our advisory councils, by the commission, through requests that might come directly to the trust, where the trust might seek input from the commission. That is what we need to document, and that, I think, is the chart that Bruce would benefit. I've said before, and I think it makes sense. This trust is about funding projects and programs that scale statewide, and those requests can come from the Federation reporting to Federation meetings, librarians, through our advisory councils, perhaps a librarian going directly to the trust, and the trust saying to the State Library Commission, is this something that you would think is a priority? Is this something that we can scale statewide? I think we need to have a memorandum of agreement with the trust board about what that process looks like and what the authority is to make those kinds of decisions.
Seems like we have the processes well in hand. We have really good models that have been working really pretty well with various advisory groups, including the coordinators, to kind of feed needs and up through the commission. It's that gap over to the trust which I don't understand.
Yep. And I think, speaking for the trust board, they understand and respect that relationship, but we need to have it documented so everybody is clear and that future boards and commissions are clear on what that relationship is. Right. This document is intended to be very limited in scope to those grants requests where the state library cannot apply for those grants as a government agency rather than a nonprofit, and giving that trust that ability to act as that fiduciary agent.
That phrasing, I think, would be helpful see.
More succinct.
It's very unclear as to what some grants.
Okay.
Mhm.
So those grants by which the state library cannot apply
Mhm.
Is the trust gonna have staff
eventually, yeah.
eventually? It seems like it, I mean, for what they're gonna be asked to be doing for this, for a, relatively small 10% administrative fee, it seems like, I'm not sure how they can get it all done for that. Depending on how many staff they have and such. It's also strange terms. Why does it go for a year and a half instead of like a fiscal year?
Oh, yeah, I don't know why it doesn't go for a fiscal year, but I think it goes for a short defined term for what, the reason that you just brought up, because those terms will have to change, I think, as far as the 10% when they're visiting staff.
Yeah.
So is that term because this is brand new, so we want it to run for
A limited
the
period.
calendar year is maybe their fiscal year potentially, or?
Oh, the trust is for.
Yeah, that would
For
be.
tax reporting.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, protection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not much discussion on risk. Is there risk involved? I mean, when you give opportunity, would that also, do we need to supply more discussion on risk, liability? I'm just,
I mean, is it normal for a trust like this to take a percentage for administrative costs but not assume any responsibility for what it's doing? It says on number 6, the trust does not assume any responsibility or liability, and all the responsibility still lies with the state library.
I don't know if that's usual or unusual. Referring to the completion of the grants themselves, the trust is not fulfilling any obligations under the grant to meet the objectives of a grant.
I understand that, but
Yes.
I mean, they could still make a serious financial mistake.
Sure.
That injures a third party, and then you'd be stuck with.
and then we are.
So clarifying that from a fiscal responsibility, they still maintain that fiscal responsibility.
Has an attorney looked at this?
Not our attorney, no.
Does the trust have an indemnity?
Question about whether you really can indemnify.
Thank you for clarifying what I'm thinking. Just don't want an opportunity to lead us down the wrong path. That ultimately will be a responsibility that will incur damage of any kind, financial or to the brand. An opportunity going forward, yeah.
So do the board members on the trust have indemnity insurance?
I must say my colleague is, actually, I may break my word, I may not actually prepare to vote for this.
I think we should probably
Table
hold
this.
it. I do want to point out that we had this on the agenda at the last meeting.
Yes.
Well,
You did.
we're not attorneys, we're, it's hard.
So I guess I would feel much more comfortable if an attorney had vetted this before we vote.
God love them.
Well, and we may have some work to do to craft an MOA as well, because in this, it does refer to the terms under which the MOA would be terminated, but we don't have one.
So craft a substitute motion, I don't know if there's one on the floor now, that would allow, there isn't, okay, good. So to allow a consensus with some defined terms, and then have that being brought forward at the next meeting
Is there any harm done by not acting on this today?
at this point.
There's no grant applications in process at this point. I know staff have brought examples of grants for which they would like to apply.
What would be an example of one?
So I can answer that, because it was all my staff.
I will come up here because I got it surface. Amelia Kim was doing some work with our early learning, early literacy, and there were a couple of foundations that would only go to a 501c3, so of course we were not eligible as an entity. And so she doesn't need them right now. She was able to get a grant from the Dennis and Rose Washington Foundation, but she was very interested, and she probably of all of us has the program that would be most likely to need these kind of supplemental grants.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on what you would like to see in the agreement. Clarity on what their fiscal responsibility is, and the legal review, clarifying that we're talking about grants for which MSL cannot apply, and that the document itself is referring to the funding through those specific grants.
And this larger framework, so we understand what the.
I was going to say, so that's specific to this document. Is someone willing to work with me to help craft an MOA for the larger framework? Bruce, anybody else? Jamie, did you want to be involved with that?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll help if you would like.
Your
I
hand
could
is
be
so
useful.
robust.
And then I think, I don't know if you included Kenning's concern about
Good for you.
It's a double E.
indemnity, I don't know what to call it, indemnity insurance. Does the board have that? But you're not just talking about that, you're talking about a broader issue, and I'm not sure how
Whether
to
the
say it.
state library can indemnify a trust so that it doesn't have any responsibility. I'd be surprised if your attorney would be happy about that. At which point it might be good to check with another attorney.
Okay, all right, I got those notes.
So there wasn't a motion, was there, on the table? Okay.
I think you just wanted to do this.
Yeah, can we have it, well, do we need to table a motion that wasn't made? I don't think we need. We'll table this agenda item. I don't think we need a vote to table an agenda item.
The table to another day, not permanently.
Okay.
Thank you. I think it's for a monkey wrench, but.
No, I know you guys want to get this right.
Okay. Are you guys, would you like to break for lunch and then you go to the volunteer appreciation class?
I would actually just simply move that we approve this request for funding. Traditional, we've always done it. We can't
No,
push out
sure.
our volunteers. I vote yes. I move that we say yes. And thank you.
Okay,
And I just want to remind the commission that you will all be invited to attend that event. That's always a great event. I'm really excited because we're going to be focusing on the Carnegie Library book, The Best Gift, and the author will be the presenter at the speaker at the volunteer event, and we're giving copies of the book as gifts to the volunteers.
and because public comment is important, I think it's nice to summarize what we're talking about. So we're talking about a request to spend up to $5,100 in state library trust funds to host the annual volunteer appreciation lunch. And so we have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I have to say, I think it's really lovely when we get these sort of the consent kind of stuff out of the way fairly efficiently, but spend the amount of time necessary for some of these tougher things. I think it's a great model.
I concur.
Yeah.
Efficiently.
How's Lightyear?
Okay, so, I mean, we don't have, I think we have, I'm going to guess 20 minutes of the meeting. Do you guys want to have lunch or finish the meeting? I'll finish the meeting.
A few minutes so that any federation coordinators
Yeah.
and that want to leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can grab their lunch, and I think Elsie's running out on this. I know.
If we can finish, when, do you have 20 more minutes?
Whatever.
That would be great. That would be lovely. Yes. Okay, and if you guys can stay, then please do, and then we'll have lunch. All right.
Oh, giggles.
So, Evan, I'm sorry. I skipped you. We skipped you. I know, but you didn't talk. Okay.
Sorry, I've done my job.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Hannah, are you? Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
All right. Commission calendar and work plan. So we'll just take a quick look at the calendar and see and kind of summarize what everyone is going to be doing. But I did want to take a second to, Elsie and I had a good exchange, and she had some ideas for me, and I'm looking. I wrote them down. And I wanted to pose the same question, and I brought this up in the beginning of the meeting. I think once in a while it's good to look at the structure of the meeting, the content of the meeting, make sure that the meeting is everybody feels like their time is well used, and to entertain any ideas for being more efficient. And I just heard the idea of a consent agenda over here. So that's a great possibility. And I'll throw out, just for an example, something that Elsie asked. Are the meeting agendas prioritized to allow for solving solutions? Are we meeting around specific goals and purposes? Those are the kinds of questions that she threw out, and so I think it's all interesting to think about. I personally think that everybody is great about preparing thoroughly, and the hyperlinks in the agenda are so useful, and our conversations are. It does, and I think that we're all really spending the time before we get here, and that we're using our time well, and having rich discussions, because we already have been informed by all of the information that's provided in the hyperlinks. A consent agenda is an idea, and so that would be interesting to look at what types of things would fit in that. And maybe somebody has an idea right now, or maybe you just want to think on it and get back to me, and that just kind of comes out of, Elsie and I thought about it for a while, kind of came up with those sort of leading questions.
What I believe the consent agenda, bringing just those words up, prioritizes that because we're not micromanaging what is happening at the agency, but we are then also prioritizing what the solutions to those big goals are within our discussion. And that's pretty much where I was leading to, but you brought up the perfect word here, which means it allows more time on our time together in our agenda to solve those hard-pressed ones, the ones that are fires that we put out, but also that long-term goal. What's our long-term goal that we're reaching at, and are we bringing that up every time, and then are we seeking a solution to that every time? That's where I was going.
Everyone of the commissioners and staff have things that I need to hear that I don't know. And the more time that I'm given in these gaps, and frankly, the coordinators were fabulous yesterday. The more time I think we structure meetings to allow that kind of exchange and for us to listen, better off we'll be able to make wise decisions with limited resources.
Okay. The one thought that I had that has come up a couple of times now is when we do participate online, and this pertains to Marlis, who looks really busy getting the lemonade ready. For example, I think it's happened to all of us that we've had some kind of connectivity problem, and in the last meeting, I didn't I wasn't able to, I know you were there, I wasn't able to hear from you. I think you were maybe able to type in, I'm not sure, but I reviewed the tape, you know, like football. And so something that I noticed was that although you were in attendance, we lacked your voice and participation because of technical difficulties. So I'm wondering if when we know we're going to be online, if we could maybe take your time 10 minutes ahead to do checks, and then I felt bad that I didn't just call you, and figured it out.
I could have done that as well.
Right, and put you on speaker. So maybe if we know, we can individually make sure that we're able to test our equipment with Marlis and make sure that we're all present.
We do try for our meetings to get on and have everything on at least 15 minutes before.
Right.
So that would be good if you're calling in, if you can do it by then.
Mm-hmm.
So we can.
And it's personal responsibility of us as well. I get
Right.
that.
I think it is I always log in 1 minute before. So I want to, get in a habit of making sure that my equipment's working before I get on the meeting. And if we could all do that, I think that would be helpful. Make sure everyone gets their voice heard.
Having said that, I sure appreciate being in the same room with my colleagues. This is great.
This is Montana. This is golden.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask a question about the idea of a consent agenda? Because to my knowledge, we've never had one in working with the commission, and I'm all in favor of simplifying some of these action items to the extent possible. I assume if you have a consent agenda item that requires more discussion, you just pull it out and allow for more discussion. So if we erred on the side of putting too much into a consent agenda, we'd have that flexibility to.
And they could be traditional items, like the event, the appreciation event. Yeah. Something that is not any means lower and doesn't rise to this occasion, but not to micromanage, but to trust, to put the trust back in to what you're doing.
So then, if we made, it would be making an amended, if we pulled something out, then we would make an amended motion.
You have to speak to Robert about this.
Geez. I think that's how a consent agenda would work, but yes.
And it's possible within the consent agenda to take and modify something, right? You can amend something within the consent agenda with consent. Isn't that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
But if it were to be something that we were going to just pull out of the agenda.
It really needed to be thrashed over, then we just yank it out.
So that's going to take some thinking.
Someone spelled someone's name.
For what types of things are appropriate for a consent agenda. Okay. So, does anybody have any ideas they'd like to share now, or do you want to just kind of think on it? Do you feel like your time is well used?
The only time I was ever in a rush was the only time I didn't feel like we were very consistent with our time. So really, I'm here for this purpose. One time in 5 years, I was in a rush and I didn't get what I wanted out of the meeting, which was quick resolution.
Yeah.
So I think that's just things that we couldn't have foreseen, technical difficulties, things like that. So I personally think our time is well spent. Having agenda items throughout. I understand what you're saying, Bruce, that it gives us time to have richer discussions after we approve everything, but that to me could also be an excuse for people to get up and leave. My duty is done, I've done the action, I'm not going to stay for the rest of the meeting. So, that's just a potential downfall of having a consent agenda is that the rest of the agenda doesn't take priority. And it's a possibility. So
the meeting still adjourns.
That's a good point. Thank you.
That's my only concern about having a consent agenda at the beginning, or your consent is all at the end, and I'm not sure where that would go.
I think consent agenda is housekeeping to me. The action items that are the things that we need to be engaged in that can have that more robust discussion to allow, again, I use the word trust what is happening at the agency. Because there would be, when this comes out, we can give a call and say, did I hear this as well on the consent agenda? So it's, again, personal responsibility to us, but not to take away from the meaningful discussion that we must have.
My experience is the consent agenda was the first thing. It usually included just exactly what Elsie said, some housekeeping stuff. And it was very seldom that we spent much time with it because we all had read it. And then we just moved on to the hard stuff.
The hard stuff. The good stuff.
The hard and good stuff, yeah.
Moving on things that were like most of the things at the end of the agenda to the beginning type of.
Yeah.
So like the rescinding the policies, there were like 4 things that we went through really quickly. Kind of up there, the same with the approval of minutes, there's rarely discussion.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Well, and things that we've considered at the previous meeting, although obviously we didn't do well on that account this time. But once we've had a month to consider them, then they might be moved into a consent agenda.
I would never expect to see the budget as part of the consent agenda, for instance.
Okay.
But what about a financial report?
No, that speaks directly to our fiduciary or fiscal responsibility. And we have to have time to really understand that. So to my way of thinking, that would never fall.
And those are timing as well. Those don't come every time.
Right, exactly.
So I think it depends on where we are within the year, fiscal or not, or where we are within it. The other part is, if I know for sure what we're going to be doing 2 meetings out, I can easily plan to make sure that my time is committed 100%. And that's where that purposeful action comes into play. If we also know that when those scripted things are, then it's easier for me as well to plan.
I try to do some of that in your commission calendar. I think we can do a little bit better, but at least to the extent that some of these regularly occurring items fall, or, for example, we know we're gonna try to have the Gigabit Toolkit report at your February meeting. I think we're hoping to have the draft public library standards at your February meeting. We can include that kind of information in your commission calendar.
Thank you.
And also, in the work objective report, there'll be those milestones that would include any objectives that we're striving to meet as they align to the commission meetings.
Thank you.
All right, so we have the calendar to look at. Is there anything, are there any meetings or events that aren't covered that would benefit from commission representation?
I did double check the date of the next legislative subcommittee. It's December 16th.
Okay.
We're also adding a volunteer luncheon.
December 16th.
December 16th.
Oh, and what date was the volunteer?
The 10th?
The day before the next commission meeting.
I can't attend that day because we have an OER day on campus. And typically that's the chair.
The chair typically acknowledges the volunteers at that event.
Are you able to attend that and take that?
Yeah.
What date was it, the 17th?
The 10th for the voluntary lunch.
The 10th is the volunteer lunch and the 16th is the legislative subcommittee.
So I can attend just as a witness, the 6:33 meeting.
The legislative subcommittee.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I'll plan to attend that one as well.
What time is that? 16?
Where to go? What, you asked what time? I think they typically start around 9, between 8 and 9. We don't have an agenda yet for when. that item would fall.
I'd like to thank my fellow commissioners for filling in for me on so many of the traveling trips this last year. I really appreciate it. I'm getting ready to put back on my traveling shoes so I can do my share. I sure appreciate it.
Jenny, do you see anything coming up that we need to get commitments for or start thinking about?
We'll get the date of the partners meeting, the Heritage Partners meeting, as soon as we have that. I think that's probably the one other thing that's not there.
Okay.
I have talked to Bruce and Ken about attending the November MLAC meeting to have a more detailed discussion about the fair access resolution.
On the 13th?
Yes, 21st, sorry. of
21st?
November.
I have it in the wrong date. Oops.
The 14th is when that meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
That's on, so what it was,
November 21st.
yeah, I think.
The partner meeting, the 26th.
The Heritage Partner meeting, we haven't confirmed it yet.
I do have a doctor's appointment that day. Should be quick.
Oh, Sagebrush is October 26th.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
When will the rest of the dates be confirmed on that calendar, like August through December?
For next calendar year?
Yeah, for 2020, August. This only goes up to June 2020.
Yeah, I think, I'm drawing a blank, is it the December commission meeting? I think it is, where we set the calendar dates for the next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would it be a problem to put in the anticipated dates with maybe like a tentative or something like that, marking on them? So when I glance at my calendar, I can say, all right, I can do all those, or I can't do two of those.
Just based on following your current pattern of second Wednesday?
Sure, or whatever, sure,
Yeah.
but even if, so that we're still holding our finger on that date.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't set it, but, this is the tentative date. That would help schedule.
And the reason I bring it up is because there has, since I've been with the commission, there's been a conflict for me with a conference that I have typically attended.
Okay.
And it's twice a year, it's in April and December.
Okay.
And it doesn't quite overlap, but it really bumps up hard against, and I realize the April meeting probably can't be changed because it's always in conjunction with MLA. But the December meeting, it's in Washington DC, and I have to do it again this year. I have to leave the meeting early, I have to fly directly to Helena, and there's just no margin for error and I can't attend the volunteer event either. So I'm just wondering if there's any room for shifting the December meeting. Not this one, but next year.
In the future, okay. Yep.
We don't have to decide it now. If we talk about it in December, that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And we don't know yet if we're confirmed for MLA.
For the conversations with the commission, I haven't officially heard yet.
Okay.
Today is the last day for submitting proposals.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay. I think let me go back. I think we need to vote to approve. No, we don't. Is that all we have for the calendar? Okay. Does anybody have other business or announcements?
I did send you all an extremely attractive picture of the stairs at the back of the library.
We'll announce the ribbon cutting when the
Which
fair
are
finishes.
not quite yet completed, but I think I suspect we have the governor's office to thank for moving that along. I thank you very much. Good for you guys.
Just a general question, is the CIT training for libraries going to be the 2-hour short sessions, or is there any resources for Federation or others to take the full 40-hour prep class. I thought it was really valuable, that session that the police chief or the captain from Bozeman gave at last couple weeks. That's really useful, I mean, for every librarian. But there's a full 40 hours. I think it costs $100 or something to take that thing. But most of the Federations are just getting this 2-hour thing. Is that right?
Yeah. I think that's what's been prioritized at this point, yeah.
Just real quick in public comment, the OPI has been graciously awarded a $50 million reading grant for literacy, and partnerships are where it is always is. So maybe there is a way that we can extend this. I know the grant has conditions already because we wrote for this in the summertime. But let me look further into this because it would be a wonderful thing to network. Mm-hmm. The other opportunity is that we are seeking the underserved in the 4 and 5-year-old world, but also partnering with adult literacy. So a program on a Dell computer with licenses for families given to families so that 4 and 5-year-olds can be on a program, but also enhance adults that may want to work toward their high set or their GED or any other learning that they may want to have. And we're looking at this as an underserved population in different regions as we roll this model out. So I believe public libraries, community library overlay within finding families for this would be a really good partnership. So I'd like to have more conversation in doing this.
That would be great. One of the challenges that we're wrestling with right now is our Ready to Read trunk program and having the capacity to scale that statewide. We have a kind of a traveling trunk model right now where each federation has a set of trunks, and that traveling model is cumbersome and not efficient. And we've talked about how we can scale that again so that every library could have one or some of these trunks. I think that would be a perfect funding opportunity.
I think that would really be good. We just released our state aggregate reading scores as well as our math scores, and they are dismal, And yet I know as a classroom teacher, we all know one score doesn't say what's happening in our schools, but to have that look, we can do better. So I'm needing help, and we're drilling down even more into groups of students in age as well as in where they are located. So help is needed. And the way the federal law is written, and if there's any way we could rewrite it, it'd be wonderful, but we're not there. But partnership in that, I think, is extremely important. So that's why I'm here.
Good.
Partnerships.
There's opportunities.
Can you say more about dismal scores?
Dismal, they're not, well, dismal, 41% proficiency, which is a C or better.
For reading?
For reading. No, that's math. I apologize for math. It's 50% well, they haven't changed. But when you look within there, especially in our groups of population, so we know special ed students have traditionally not been proficient, but we had a lot more take it this time because we allowed more access. And we drilled down specifically on how you administer a test that is an alternative test to a special population like that. But gaps are there, and we must, lessen the gaps, whether you're 3rd grade going into 4th grade, because that's a growth model now, the new federal law is. And our ACT scores reflected stagnant as well. So improvement, isn't that what we're all about, is improvement. So they're not dismal in the fact that they are a huge gap from last year. They're not improving. And to me, that not improving, we all have to work on this. It's just not that classroom teacher's responsibility. It's family, it's community, it's school. So
So the reading proficiency was aimed at what age? What age?
we test from 3rd grade to all the way till the end of graduation. Our ACT is in our secondary and our high school. So it's 3rd grade to 8th grade that we have an annual test every year with it. But we're drilling down more into data, having more data literacy for teachers and schools as well to understand a growth model. And there is 30% of our school population that moves. So trying to put our finger or our thumb on a population is challenging. So more help is needed. We just released that today. Schools have this information early on, June, but this is the aggregate of who we are. And we're looking at it differently at the state level. So how we can find solutions with that. But I do believe early literacy is an opportunity, and then working in the K-12 space of literacy is what the grant has. It's more in transitions. So what does happen when you have coming into school to going into middle school from elementary and then transitioning into high school? So, but just real quick on another thing, a new science test will be delivering in 20, and it will be in concert with not another test. It'll be with the ACT. So we're going to be using the ACT in secondary for our science. The others will be a component part of what we already do. So so science is very important. I mean, it's the STEM that we've been working so diligently for. But we're all in this together, right? So opportunities, so we're going to talk some more. We have our lunch.
Thank you. Are there any further public comments? Okay, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Thank you all.
Have a good night.